Welcome to Renegade Conversations. This is Season 3, Episode 17. My guest today is a polemical feminist whose specialty is uncovering neglected historical female figures. I had to look up the meaning of the word polemical, which means expressing or constituting a strongly critical attack on or controversial opinion about someone or something. I can't wait to hear how she expresses her controversial opinions as a feminist scholar. My name is Meryl Cook. I'm an artist, a renegade, and host and creator of Renegade Conversations. My mission is to provide thought-provoking, fearless, and fun discussions with remarkable female rebels who are shaking things up in their respective fields. My hope is to make you question the norms and ignite your own renegade spirit. This episode of Renegade Conversations is sponsored by Mary Jane Copps. Mary Jane has been writing her own paycheck since 1985, first as a freelance real estate journalist, and then launching a tech startup in 1987. She embraced her alter ego, the phone lady, in 2006. She works with clients throughout North America and in Australia, England, and France, giving them the skill to inspire valuable conversations with clients, customers, and prospects. Mary Jane has been profiled as a communications expert by Australia Broadcasting, Fox and Friends, Harry Enton's CNN podcast Margins of Error, as well as by the Wall Street Journal, National Post, the Globe and Mail, CBC, CTV, Global, as well as other publications, television, and radio outlets, including, and this is my favorite, a very silly skit on This Hour has 22 minutes. Mary Jane is also the author of The Phone Book, Essential Telephone Communication Skills, and writes a bi-weekly blog on sales and customer service communication skills. My next guest, Kristin S. Williams, Ph.D., is the director of the F.C. Manning School of Business at Acadia University, one of the oldest and most respected liberal arts universities in Canada. She is an associate professor in management at Acadia University and holds a visiting scholar appointment at the University of Eastern Finland in innovation management. Dr. Williams is also the founder, managing director, and principal researcher at Prudentia Institute, Youth Knowledge Exchange. It's home to the award-winning Student Research Lab. She is co-editor-in-chief at the Journal of Culture and Organization and a member of the editorial advisory board at the Journal of Management History. Dr. Williams has received several academic awards, and she is a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee Medal. So welcome, Kristin. It's really nice to see you, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Oh, so am I. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Kristin, you and I were introduced by the former Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Mayanne Francis. Dr. Francis shared with me your interest in Viola Desmond was how the two of you connected. And for those listeners who don't recognize her, Viola Irene Desmond was a Canadian and civil women's rights activist and businesswoman of Nova Scotian descent. So anybody in Nova Scotia knows who Viola Desmond is. And she also is on the $10 bill in Canada. But in 1946, Ms. Desmond challenged racial segregation at a cinema in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, by refusing to leave a whites-only area of the Roseland Theatre. So she's kind of a big deal. So thanks for agreeing to hop on Zoom to have this conversation with me, Kristin.
Well, I always enjoy conversations about remarkable women and with remarkable women, so thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So, Kristin, what does being a renegade mean to you?
Well, I think for me, it lives at the intersection of some of my academic work, my scholarship work, and the work that I do in terms of advocacy. So I really think, unlike some academics who really focus on advancing scholarly conversations in the field of academia. I'm also really interested in making sure that that scholarship and those new ideas are also getting out into the world of the general population. And of course, that is what introduced me to Lieutenant Governor Marian Francis, because I was researching Viola Desmond at the time as part of my doctoral research. And that brought us together. So we started having conversations, found a lot in common in terms of our interests. And she was really instrumental in not only giving me the encouragement I needed, but also opening up new opportunities to have conversations and to share what I learned about Viola Desmond to help others be advocates and activists, and to really be part of anti-Black racism in terms of being advocates and supporting others. So that's really the fundamental aspect of our relationship. And in terms of what being a renegade for me is, it's always trying to do more and always trying to do better, and to think about the social good that we can put out there in the world. And sometimes that's just building on the inherent talents that we have. And for me, using Viola Desmond as an example, I'm a feminist scholar, and I sit inside a business school. So my field is management and organizational studies. And when I started looking at the story of Viola Desmond, I realized that we were saying a lot about her contributions to civil rights, actually her overlooked contributions at the time to civil rights. But what I detected was a more unknown story regarding her contributions to entrepreneurship as a businesswoman. So we talk about her as a businesswoman, but we don't really unpack what that means. And so I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me as a feminist scholar to talk about a woman and to talk about her contributions to business, and particularly Black entrepreneurship in a time when we were essentially a segregated society, and she was building a new business from the bottom up, and introducing a new industry in Canada. So not only is she an incredible civil rights leader and activist, but she is also a groundbreaking, pioneering entrepreneur that did, quite frankly, what very few others could have done.
Oh, that's awesome. Wonderful. Nice. And have you always been a renegade?
I think if you asked friends and family, they would say yes.
Yes.
How I have presented that, or how it has materialized, may have changed over the years. As I'm 50 years old this year, and certainly I've matured in my thinking, and I've developed skills over the years in terms that I can deploy my activism and my renegade character in different ways. But I've always had a really strong sense of right and wrong, and a strong commitment to social justice. And I've really felt that it's important when you have privilege to use it to help others. And it's important when you are empowered to help empower others.
Oh, that's lovely. I think that that's a common theme in many of the renegades that I've interviewed, is this whole idea of not only are we outspoken, but our purpose is to make the world a better place, right? There's that underpinning for all of us, which is really exciting. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And can you talk about what an impact being a renegade has had on your life and your career? So what opportunities and challenges has it presented? So for example, I would think that being a feminist scholar in a management school or a school of business is can't have been easy.
No, it certainly wasn't. And even backtracking a little before that, I spent the better part of half of my career in the nonprofit sector, in the charitable sector, working on a variety of causes that were committed to social justice. And alongside that, I'd always been a scholar. I'd always been a student. And so my transition into academia landed me in business and management, which made sense for a number of reasons. I had been running organizations. I had a lot of leadership experience. And when I started a program of research, it made sense to me to identify as a feminist scholar. It made sense to me to carry out my interests in terms of social justice in the way that I'm built as a person. But you're quite right. It's not easy being a feminist scholar in any field.
Right.
It's certainly not interested in being, it's not easy to be a feminist scholar in management and organizational studies. And to be honest, the kind of feminist that I am is also a bit unique. So even within, I would say, feminist theories and feminist methods span quite a range of opportunities and interventions and investigations, all making very worthy contributions to a number of different disciplines. But I'm even on the margin in that group, without a doubt. I practice a brand of feminist theory and method that's quite outspoken. I'm interested in intellectual interventions on taken for granted ways of thinking and ways of doing. So that not only means that I investigate the current practices within management and organizational studies, but I investigate what we've overlooked, like the Viola Desmonds of the world. And I consider, why did we overlook them? So I not just look at what they ought to have been recognized for, but I consider, well, what erased them? What caused us to overlook them in the first place? And
what are those systems, and are they still existing today? Yes, I get it.
Very much so. So it requires me to be a bit provocative, and to engage with methodologies and ways of writing that are not well accepted, even within management and organizational studies. A little bit more so in the humanities and social sciences, but really, actually, the history of management and organizational studies as a discipline is a bit younger than other disciplines. And so some of the women that I've researched, in addition to Viola Desmond, have been recognized for something, but often that's been at the cost of being recognized for anything else. We don't appear to want to let women have a robust or diverse resume. She can have some recognition. In Viola's case, she can be recognized as a civil rights leader, but then there's some resistance to giving her even more space. So once we break through and we give her some recognition, there's then a challenge to allow her to have even more space. And so that's the kind of work that I try to do. And of course, I stay within my own lane in terms of management and organizational studies.
Cool. I have a master's degree in applied clinical, and our industrial organizational was my specialty.
Oh, really?
At St. Mary's.
So I've done some work in terms of what we call the political economy and labor relations. So those would be early understandings of the industrial economy. And a recent paper that I published actually looked at Victorian novelist Elizabeth Gaskell. So I don't know if you've read any of her work, but when she was writing in the 1850s and 60s, of course, she could only occupy a particular kind of role. Being a novelist was a bit taboo at that point in time. Certainly a female novelist was a bit taboo. But she actually wrote pretty impressive critiques of industrial relations at the time. So she was writing about factory life. She was writing about how workers organized. She was writing about how labor was treated. And she was very invested in the moral ethic of that arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And she shared those ideas
Mm-hmm.
in novel form. So she's recognized as a Victorian novelist, but she's not recognized as an
A
early
labor leader.
thinker.
Yeah.
Yeah, an early thinker
Awesome.
in labor relations, an early
Mm-hmm.
political economist.
Well,
And her ideas have actually been taken up by other mainstream male thinkers and credited to mainstream male thinkers. So I think my job in that respect is to say, well, wait a moment.
yeah.
I actually think we need to recognize her for what she is, not
Mm-hmm.
just a novelist, but a political economist in her own right.
I love that. And I love the idea that women historically may have been recognized, but as being unidimensional characters as opposed to full-on people that had many accomplishments. So I love that. That's wonderful. And so I imagine being in the management school and having the approach that you have hasn't always been easy.
No, it hasn't. So I've really tried to be very thoughtful in terms of what kind of contribution I can make. And I'm well supported by a growing group of critical scholars in the feminist space who are challenging the way that we think and write scholarship, challenging the subjects we write about. It's a small but mighty group.
Awesome.
So I'm certainly not alone.
Yeah.
But it's very typical for scholars to find their own intellectual communities. And I certainly have found mine.
Good.
And some of my work, I think, is hopefully breaking out of just that siloed community.
Nice.
And when I did the research on Viola Desmond, one of the ways that I did that was I not just wrote about her in a scholarly space, and that work is published and it's been peer reviewed and it's passed all of those important milestones.
Yes.
But I also worked very hard to see what I could do to advocate for her in the present in different spaces. So I wrote a nomination for her to be recognized in the Nova Scotia Business Hall of Fame, and she was inducted in 2021. I then was invited by the family to pen new monuments that are currently installed in Camp David, both for Viola Desmond and her sister Wanda Robson.
Oh, my.
And I've been trying very, very hard to make sure that not just scholars are reading this work. So now if you were to visit Camp David and see Viola Desmond's gravestone, you'll see that her history has been corrected.
Nice.
She is now recognized as both the civil rights leader and a businesswoman who did remarkable things and accomplished just so much. And quite frankly, I think she continues to be an inspiration for women and business leaders today. So that's the impact, right? When we can do this work and we can apply the skills we have, as in my case, as a researcher, as a scholar, it leads to potentially education and inspiration in others.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. So we're going to take a short break for a message from our sponsor. And when we come back, I'm going to have some fun questions for you.
Hi, fellow Renegades. I'm Mary Jane Cops, otherwise known as the Phone Lady, and I'm delighted to be sponsoring Meryl's Renegade Conversations because I'm all about the conversations. I work with clients throughout North America, in England, France, and Australia, working with teams and individuals to help them inspire amazing conversations with their prospects, their clients, their customers, even their family and friends. Want to learn more? Head over to my website, thephonelady.com. And we can also connect on LinkedIn. I'm the only Mary Jane Cops on LinkedIn. I look forward to meeting you. Now let's get back to Meryl and her guest.
Okay, we're back now. So Kristin, did you bring a drink to share?
I did. I brought a cup of tea. I actually brought a whole pot of tea. Tea is my favorite afternoon drink. It's actually decaffeinated though, because I've had enough caffeine this morning already. It's decaffeinated Earl Grey.
Nice.
But I love tea. It always makes me feel comforted and relaxed. And so it's my go-to beverage in the afternoon and sometimes the evening as well.
Oh, lovely. Thanks. And is there a particular brand of Earl Grey that you love?
This is Tetley, but I am not particular.
Great.
If you were to look at my tea cupboard right now, I'm pretty sure you would find a lot of different varieties of different. I also love peppermint tea. I love chai tea. So I really am a bit of a tea enthusiast.
Nice. Nice.
And there's never a shortage of tea in my house.
Awesome. I have a similar cupboard. So here's a fun question. In grade 2, what kind of kid were you?
Grade 2. I was a pretty serious kid.
Mhm.
I think I've always been a serious person. Not to
Mhm.
say I don't have a sense of humor. I think I
Mhm.
do. But as I said, from very early on, I had a strong sense of right and wrong. And that's always been with me, even from very young. I've always been a bit precocious, and so felt that I could engage with adults about adult conversations, and that got me in hot water more than once. Because I was very liberal with my my opinions and confident in terms of what I thought and confident in terms of what I wanted to share.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And here's a question that I often ask. It's a question that I ask in my workshops as well. It's a way to get people thinking outside the box. And the question is there a line or shape that would define you? So if you were to either ask someone to draw for you or draw for yourself a line or shape that represents either you or your life, what would that look like?
That's really interesting. So I think the shape needs to not only progress, but it needs to return and intersect. So sometimes I think of a Venn diagram in terms of it having these intersecting circles, and these intersecting circles holding space for particular interests and qualities that have convergence. And in that, there's no beginning and no end. There's just a kind of onward mobility of ideas. And so that's the configuration that resonates with me. It's not a simple square or triangle or circle. It's probably something that represents a convergence and something that says that there is no beginning and there is no end.
And is there anything in those particular areas that you can identify?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with a colleague recently who I appreciated this conversation so much. We were talking about scholarly interests, and I actually have a lot of different spokes to my scholarly interests. And she said to me, she said, the thread that I see is empowerment. It's present in the research I do around youth, which helps youth engage in the process of research and investigate the ideas and interests that they have and explore the social issues that are important to them. It's present in my historical work, where I'm trying to empower voices that have been overlooked. It's present in my history, my career of working in social justice and really trying to be a change maker and an advocate. So I really appreciated that someone gave me that perspective, because I don't know if I would have teased that out with such clarity. So yeah, I share that with you because it's a recent observation.
It sounds like it would make a very interesting rug, actually. In my opinion, sort of a Venn diagram and the empowerment. I don't know what shocker color would be. Perhaps yellow, which has to do with sort of this sense of who we are. But anyway,
it's interesting you said a rug, because when I was writing my book, which I definitely want to tell you about, I was thinking about how I was trying to sew together these different pieces of women's lives. And in that exercise, I envisioned making a quilt. So that was sort of this kind of creative visual representation.
Mhm.
And quite recently, I've been exploring with a colleague of mine collage as a research method. So
Yeah.
collage is a way to understand the data,
Uh-huh.
to interpret the data, and then to talk about what the collage also reveals about our own thinking,
Mhm.
our own
Mhm.
bias, our own
Mm.
uncovered ideas.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that's interesting. I think that, when we look at things, we can take all sorts of approaches, and I'm
Mhm.
particularly keen to stretch our understanding of what constitutes a method of inquiry,
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
constitutes the way that we intake information, the way
Yep.
that we make sense of information. Um, it's not always just about writing. I mean, it
No.
can be, but
Yes.
scholarly writing in particular is actually a really restrictive way of expressing yourself.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
sometimes leaves a lot to be desired. It's not very accessible. It can be very tiring. So
Mm.
how do you infuse that space,
Mhm.
new
Mhm.
ideas and novel insights?
That's really interesting. And I think um, your Venn diagram and could be used as a collage quilt, kind of an applique quilt. And you could have words, you could have all kinds of things intersecting, which would be so interesting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with there's a scholar in the US and she calls herself the Crochet Activist.
Oh,
And
really?
oh, I have to think of her name. But I've been trying to get her as a guest on Renegade Conversations, but she says she's too shy to come on camera. But
Okay.
she teaches handwork and craft as a way to discuss social activism. It's so
Mhm.
interesting. Let me see if I can find her.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me,
Oh, it's
actually.
really cool. I just think it's a brilliant approach to um, influencing young scholars and people who are coming into the field. Um,
It also makes the process of inquiry more accessible. If people are allowed to express themselves in multiple ways, whether they are contributing to a
mhm.
research project, or they're leading a
Mhm.
research project, or they're leading a community project,
Yeah, yeah,
um, that's really powerful.
it
Um,
is. It is. It
yeah.
really is. So her name is Hinda, um, and she's, I believe, in the New York area.
I'll look her up.
Her name is anyway. It's under Crochet Activism on Instagram, and she's just super interesting and yeah, great. Anyway, we digressed, but that was fun. So, what advice do you have for women or people, anyone who wants to
Mm.
access more of their inner wild self or their renegade self? How would you suggest they get started?
Well, I think the world we're living in right now is a pretty overwhelming place.
Mhm.
And um, I think we all want to make change. I think we all want to make some sort of positive change.
Mhm.
And I actually think the trick is not to try to try to take on too much. It's actually doing a bit of sort of reflecting on, what am I good at? What am I passionate about? Where can I make a difference?
Mhm.
Starting with your own self.
Yeah.
Um, I've always felt it's really important to leave lots of space for lots of different voices. I never presume I'm the only one to advocate for something. I'm the only one to speak for someone else. That makes no sense. I want to speak
Mhm.
with people. I want to advocate with people. I want to
Mhm.
share space. I want to share these opportunities.
Mhm.
And part of how I figured out how to be an advocate is really figuring out what I'm good at
Mhm.
and working to develop those skills and
Mhm.
being persistent,
Mhm.
not giving up.
Yeah.
And my project with Viola Desmond, it ultimately led to this book, which is called Historical Female Management Theorists. And in the book, I actually investigate Frances Perkins, who is the first labor secretary in the US. Hallie Flanagan, who led a project called the Federal Theater Project in the US, Madeline Perrant, who is a labor activist in Canada, and Viola Desmond, who is an entrepreneur here from Nova Scotia. So it started with the writing. It started with the curiosity. It started with, I want to know more. Who are these women? What have they done?
Yeah.
And then it took me to a place of, well, if I understand who they are, I can also understand, what did we miss? What did we fail to consider in my field and management and organizational studies? What lessons can I bring to the surface that we ought to be talking about in the present, even if their contributions are in the past? We all rely on historical thinkers to inform our present day thinking.
Yeah.
So I felt it was really important to look historically at other actors who had been neglected.
Yeah.
And then I think what continued to drive my interest was the creative process. So in this book, I actually have imaginary conversations with these women.
Oh, nice, nice.
I imagine that I travel back in time and I have the opportunity to talk to them, like you're interviewing me right now.
Yeah.
And I use their first voice accounts from previous chroniclers, from their own writing, to fill the space of them, to give them agency in the moment.
Yeah.
And in that, I can surface these ideas that they had and make them relevant to management and organizational studies. So, we started this conversation with, I'm a little bit out there as a feminist scholar.
Yeah, awesome.
And when people used to talk to me, well, what kind of research do you do? I used to joke, I talk to dead people, because in some respects I do.
Yes,
In some
that's
respects,
wonderful.
I'm very interested in what they would have said. If we asked them today, what do you think about this? What would they say? So that has always driven me. When you ask me, what advice do I have? It's really been, start with yourself, understand what you like to do, what interests you, what makes you passionate, and just see where it takes you. Because it can take you in some weird and wonderful directions.
Right.
And it's certainly been a very gratifying journey for me so far.
And I love the idea of see where it takes you. And I think that's another common thread that I'm starting to see with my Renegade conversations is for the most part, people don't have a hard and fast plan for their life. They find some passion, they do some research, and then they take a step and take a next step and figure out where it's going. So I think that there's some kind of ease or confidence in being a renegade, in kind of following your heart or following your passion and trusting that you have this inner knowing that what is right for you. So yeah.
And we're always becoming, right? We're always becoming. It doesn't matter what age we are. Like this process can start at any moment.
And it's never too late, right?
Never too late.
Yeah, awesome.
Never too late.
Well, thank you so much. And the last question I have is, do you have a question for me?
Well, I would love to know, if you were to encapsulate all the brilliant lessons that you've learned, what advice would you give me?
The brilliant lessons that I've learned from other Renegade conversations?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think the advice is that I seem to have learned from everyone is really do your inner work, which you've said, do your inner work first, and then be brave. There's courage that's required in being a renegade. And when you're following your heart and you have a good sense of purpose, in other words, there's something you want to accomplish through your work that is going to benefit the world, then go for it and just keep going for it. I think the other thing that I have learned from these renegade conversations is find your tribe. And not, it's, I feel like when doing these conversations, I'm also finding a tribe, but it's about finding people that resonate with you, that don't drag you down, that support and cheer from the sidelines when you make an accomplishment, and that lift each other up, really is I think what it's all about. So Yeah,
That's
but
great
thank you.
advice.
That's a good question. Great. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I know you're heading off on vacation tomorrow, which is lovely. And I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with me.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope hearing how Kristin is advocating and pushing for change in so many ways has inspired you to embrace more of your renegade self. If you need a little help getting started, please reach out to me. This episode was sponsored by Mary Jane Copps. Mary Jane has been writing her own paycheck since 1985, first as a freelance real estate journalist, and then launching a tech startup in 1987. She embraced her alter ego, the phone lady, in 2006. She works with clients throughout North America and in Australia, England, and France, giving them the skill to inspire valuable conversations with clients, customers, and prospects. Mary Jane has been profiled as a communications expert by Australian Broadcasting, Fox and Friends, Harry Enton's CNN podcast Margins of Error, as well as by the Wall Street Journal, National Post, the Globe and Mail, CBC, CTV, Global, as well as other publications, television and radio outlets, including, and this is my personal favorite, a very silly skit on This Hour Has 22 Minutes. Mary Jane is also the author of the phone book, Essential Telephone Communication Skills, and writes a bi-weekly blog on sales and customer service communication skills. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Renegade conversations. It's also available wherever you get your podcasts as an audio version. Thanks so much for listening.